Friday. I'm Derrick Day, and he is.
I am Aaron Tomlinson. Good to be with everybody. Good to be with you, Derrick.
Yep, good to have you here, Aaron. And it looks like I didn't set up the Instagram thing right again, so it's not on Instagram. We'll figure this out. One of these days, we're gonna get this, and we'll be live every fucking where, everywhere.
I'm going to share this to my page. If it'll let me. Dang it. So
So
what's in the glass? Oh, did you just say? I'm sorry. I'm a little out.
no, I was about to ask you, but you beat me
Okay.
to the punch, man. So I am drinking a Black Russian, which, for those of you who don't know, is it's Kahlua, which is rum and coffee liqueur with a shot of vodka, and that's what makes a Black Russian. And it fits into our subject for tonight because Aaron, what are we talking about? And oh, first, what's in your glass, and then what are we talking about?
Yeah, I'm still trying to find it here where I can share it. I'm not seeing the share button tonight for some reason.
Really?
I don't know why. That's really weird. I'm not seeing any buttons. I'm not seeing where I could like it or comment or any of that stuff.
Really? That's
Yeah.
Hang on. Let's take a look at this. Make sure that we're completely public and all of that because we used to have these problems with Zoom,
Yeah, I remember.
and maybe we're having the same issue with.
Oh, wait. Here we go. Here we
Oh,
go.
you got
I
it.
found it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was weird. Okay, I'm drinking wine tonight. I'm drinking a Merlot, a cheap one.
What Merlot, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I don't mind you asking at all. It's Yellowtail. It's cheap.
Oh, okay. It went cheap and easy, huh?
I went cheap and easy. I did. Yeah, I looked at my expenditures from last year and I thought, well, I need to cut back a little bit.
Well, the bane of our existence here is eating out. That's
Yeah.
eating out is. I think we spend a car note
Oh yeah,
on,
easy.
on eating out.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah. So I thought tonight would be fun to talk about transitions, and it's a pretty broad subject. So transition would be the way I'm thinking about it is in any area of your life where you're leaving one state of existence and moving into another, and the time in between, or what a friend of mine calls, and I like this, the messy middle. the,
okay,
the messy middle. So it could be a career change, job change, any kind of life change. Moving, you moved
yep,
recently, right?
yep,
It could apply to deconstruction. You deconstruct from your religious beliefs or whatever political beliefs, whatever beliefs you have, things that you held on to that was part of who you were. Uh, Transition and deconstruction is interesting as hell, right? Because
yep,
you know who you are, and then you deconstruct, and then it's like, okay, now what? And so the transition is sort of like the now what
yep,
time. Um, or sometimes a season is ending, right? Um, maybe you need a career change or you need a job change, but you don't know exactly where to go with that.
yep.
And so you're not where you were and you're not where you want to be. So you're in the messy middle.
That's
And
nice.
that's what I would define as a transition. And then as a follow up to that, how do we navigate transitions in our lives so that we make it through those transitions and don't lose our minds? So that's where my headspace is with this topic.
And that's really when you said transitions, I was like, boom, that's excellent, right? Because I would say, Aaron, if there is a defining word in my life, is transition.
Yeah, me too. Ironically, I was thinking the same thing.
Because I think about career changes. I think about births and deaths, and I think about all of the different things in my life, and everything it represents a transition. A transition, a simple way of putting it, is a pivot from one
Mm.
phase to the next,
Yeah.
right? And I like how you put it, the messy middle, because you know some people, and talking about deconstruction, right? deconstruction, I think, does a lot of people a grave disservice, or deconstruction as a mindset, right? Not so much deconstructing as a process, but as a mindset,
Hmm.
because it keeps you in the messy middle. You're not allowed to pivot. You're there, and it's like, okay, now I'm going to be in a perpetual state of deconstruction.
Hmm.
I'm not actually going back to where I was, and I'm not moving forward, but I like this whole thing where I'm just spending the rest of my life peeling back the onion,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
But transition, I think about, and I'll use myself as an example. Two major transitions that didn't involve anybody dying in my
Hmm.
life. One was when I transitioned politically
Hmm.
from being a staunch conservative Republican to being a liberal neo socialist, right? And that's why I picked a black Russian tonight, because people call me communist, and I tell people all the time, look, communist isn't it isn't the flex, it isn't the insult you think it is, right? Uh, but I'm black, and I'm accused of being a communist, so hey, I'm black Russian. Anyway, that was the point behind that. Uh, but anyway, coming out of the political change, and here's the thing with me in my life, I've always said I'm not going to get caught in the transition.
Hmm.
It's like when you write a screenplay or something like that, you say fade to black, or wipe, or curtain falls, whatever, right? And that's the transition from one scene to a next. And I don't want to get caught in that transition. I want to be in this scene because this is a moment, right? And we
Hmm.
talk about mindfulness a lot. So I want to be in this moment, but when I'm out of this moment, I want to be in the next moment. I don't being in transition is, in my mind, being between moments, right? And to me, like you said, the messy middle. That's a great way of putting it. And the second one is when when I finally reached the end of my deconstruction, and I said, okay, this yarn that I've been pulling, there's no sweater, right?
Right.
And so I realized that, and that was another moment of change, and I was content to be in that messy middle, because I thought I could keep one foot in Christianity or one foot in atheism, and I'd be okay, right?
Right.
But I had to choose, because I wanted to be in one scene or the other.
Right.
So that was when I made that transition from Christianity to atheism, right?
Right.
So I'm I'm now looking at, okay, when I go back and I replay the cinema of my life, transitions factor into my life heavily,
Hmm.
because see, some people, they get into a rut, and sometimes it's not a rut, sometimes it's a groove, right? You can be in a groove, and a groove is like kind of rhythmic, right? And you're doing the same thing, but it works for you. But a rut is where you're in something, you're in a groove that's not working at all.
Right.
It's mud and shit all on to either side of you.
Right.
And so what I decided is that I didn't want to be in a rut. I had to move, and when I look on my life, and every time when I've made a career change, I've relocated, all of these things, these were hard pivots. I mean, where I can actually look and see the shift.
Hmm.
And that's so what I want to share with everybody before I kick it back to you, Aaron, is what I like to be the takeaway from this, the call to action from this, is that those of you who are out here that you feel like you're stuck in between the scenes of your life, how do we navigate out of that and
Hmm.
get to the next scene? Because that's where life happens. Life doesn't happen in the transition. The transitions are a part of life, but life doesn't happen in the transitions. You gotta go from one scene to the next. So is where I'll kick it back to you, man.
Yeah. So I was relating this also to, or have in the past, not just today. This isn't a new thought for me, but um, relating it to nature. Nature has transitions when we think about light and dark.
Yeah.
It's funny. One of the things that helped me deconstruct was the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1. He says, if you want to understand what God is like, look at nature,
Mm.
because God's. He says, in Romans 1, you can the heathen basically can look at nature and understand the nature of the Godhead.
Yeah.
The only problem with that is that there's a lot of contradiction, especially now that we know more. But about cosmology and nature and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of contradiction between nature and what's in the scriptures. And the first thing I noticed was this balance between light and darkness, right?
Yep.
That it's equal. We have a shortest day of the year, we have a longest day of the year, we have the equinoxes, we have night, we have day, and in between all of that are transitions. So you don't go like it's not like it's almost dusk outside, right? So it's more like the world is on a dimmer switch than a light switch, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't just go from bright sunlight to bam, pitch black, right?
Yep.
And stars and moon, there's transition to it. So it's a slow compared to a binary switch, on off switch.
Yep.
It's a slower process. And then in the seasons, you've got fall. You don't go from summer to winter, and you go from winter to summer. Although here in Colorado, it feels like we go from winter to summer.
Yeah.
Summer to winter, but some of that's climate change. And people that don't believe in climate change, you didn't grow up in Colorado, because it's so different now from when I was a kid. But you have those transitions, right? Fall being a transitional season, spring being a transitional season. And so in light of that, if you want to use the Hermetic idea of as above, so below, or as without, so within, I think that transitions are a psychological necessity.
Yep.
That we ease into things, depending on a person's pace, I guess.
Yeah.
But you bring up a really good point, because you can get stuck in a rut where you're spinning your wheels, and you need to get out of that rut. But facing the future takes courage, right? Facing the future takes planning, facing the future takes vision, but it also takes courage. And sometimes transition is so messy, or it's so scary, or it's so uncomfortable that we stay stuck in the rut so that we don't have to deal with the transition. So it's almost like the saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right?
Yep.
And so it is very possible. And I know I've never been stuck in a rut like I have been these last few years in my life. And just, growing in real time, talking about pivoting and making a decision. A lot of it boils down to making a decision. I don't know what all the new challenges are going to be when I move into a new space, new place, whether that's moving to a new city, whether that's changing jobs, whether that's changing relationships, whether it's, I think I saw Tracy comment on here, like when the kids leave the nest, that's a transition. That's a life transition. Well, I've raised my kids. That's kind of the end game there. What's next, right? And even schools give you summer break to transition from one grade to the next. So the idea of a transition is built into us, and I think it's a psychological necessity. I think it gives us time to adapt psychologically so that we can be at our best when we are in the new position. But we can prolong that transition a lot longer than it needs to be, because we're just sitting back in indecisiveness.
Yeah.
Or fear, or whatever, overthinking, man. Overthinking just kills us, doesn't it?
Yep. Analysis paralysis.
Yeah. If we could just shut that stuff off, which is where I think, things like meditation and stuff can help, and being present to the moment can help us, prevent us from overthinking, because somehow we have this idea as human beings that if we think about it hard enough and anticipate enough, I don't know, negativity or positivity. I mean, it could go either way, Derrick. We
Yeah.
could sit there and be stuck in thinking about the future and it's just a fantasy, right? Because we're not taking any action to actually get ourselves there. So we're just basically daydreaming.
Yep.
Or we can be running worst case scenarios through our head and then scaring ourselves with our own thoughts about what's going to come next and put ourselves in such a state of anxiety that we do end up in that sort of paralysis of analysis.
Yep. And I was thinking about something earlier today, and I was thinking about the law of attraction. And you and I spend a lot of time. We talk about the law of attraction on the show and offline. We spend a lot of time talking about this. And one of the things about the law of attraction, and this hit me today. I mean, this was a growing in real time moment. That the law of attraction only works when you do something to attract what it is that you need.
Right.
It's like if you're not actively pursuing a course that causes attraction, right? In other words, there are some people that they say they have the animal magnetism, right? That people are they naturally gravitate toward them, but
Yeah.
those people are really far and few between, right? Most of us, we have to cultivate characteristics in ourselves that cause us to attract
For
the
sure.
kind of people and situations that we want.
For sure.
So I was thinking about that and when you said transitions as a topic, that really hit me because one of the things people don't get to the transitioning moment
Mm-hmm.
because they're stuck in a previous mindset, right? So this mindset causes them to stay in and this is a challenge, right? Because you were saying like transitioning from one grade to the next, right? Okay, so what do you have to do to transition from one grade in school to the next? You have to pass all of the course requirements,
Right.
right? So that earns you the right to transition. So the other thing that I want everyone to understand is that transitions, for the most part, now granted, there are some transitions that happen that are irrespective of your input. Birth, death, layoffs, economic situations. But for the most part, the transitions in your life are things that you've done the prerequisite
Mm-hmm.
for the transition to happen.
Right.
And that works both positively and negatively. Because you do a positive thing like, okay, I'm going to be more conscientious of my spending.
Right.
So that allows me to save more money, allows me to reduce my debt, to increase my credit score, and now I'm able to transition from being a renter to a buyer, or I'm able to transition from driving an older car to a newer car, or better car insurance or better health insurance, the things that come with better credit and better income. So that means I've done something to earn the transition. And most of the transitions that happen in our lives, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of the transitions in our lives are things that we've earned. In other words, we've done the work, either good or bad, to create this transition,
Yeah.
right? So at the other side of the transition, the next scene is the consequences of the action that triggered the transition, positive or negative, right? So I think about this because I think about like I've had really great credit and I've had really bad credit, and I understand what goes into both of those. So now when I made the decision to go about fixing my credit, that created a transition that allowed me to, you know, buy a house, buy a new car, all of these other things, right?
Hmm.
And that's the positive outcome of it. So, but then before I had good credit, I had bad credit, and it was because I made some not so wise financial decisions that caused me to to overextend myself, and again, the transition that triggered a transition. God, I gotta say this too real quick before I
Sure.
kick it back to you, is that in IT, when we program, code, when we write code, you have these decisions, right? Boolean transitions, and or, right? Those kind of things, positive, negative kind of things, and those represent a transition in state, right, from one state to the next. And so basically, what I'm getting at here is that we're actively writing the code of our lives.
Hmm.
We're actively writing the code, but a poorly placed uh, decision, a poorly placed decision will create a poor transition. And,
Hmm.
and in IT, when we're making transitions, we want to make them efficiently because that uses the computing power and the memory efficiently. So if we don't do that, right, then what we have is inefficient code, or we get into what they call a loop, right? There's a good thing for a loop, like where you do until you're reading a file until you reach the end, right? But then you get what you call an endless loop or an infinite loop, where you're stuck and you're just doing the same thing over and over and over
Hmm.
again.
Hmm. You know, I was I hadn't put these two things together, but I had read a interesting article this week about the importance of creating goals and objectives for yourself after the age of 25.
Mm,
And the premise of the article was that, and we're talking about school, passing the grade, going to the next level. Um, you level up by design for the first 25 years, basically, the average person, for the first 25 years of your life. So each year in school, you're leveling up. You go from, elementary school to middle school or junior high, and then to high school, right?
mhm,
And then after high school, whatever. So typical path after high school, you go to a trade school, you go to a community college, you go join the military, go to college, whatever the case may be. You're still leveling up by design, by structure. Then you get a job or start your career, you're still leveling up by structure. And then what they estimate is that around 25, you can either, I don't know who wrote this article because I don't know if this is possible today, but by 25, definitely when I was, my our era, by 25, if everything went right, you could buy a home, you get married, sometime in your late 20s, you settle down and start having children, right?
mhm.
The problem is after 25, you're in that loop
Yep.
because there's nothing structurally growing you. And so I think an important part of this topic of transition is growth, because each year you would go to school, you'd be presented with new subject material, harder subject material that would, for most people, force them to apply themselves, and they would get some growth out of that, right?
Yep.
But at 25, there's nothing left to push you into that kind of growth. And let's be honest, as human beings, as a general rule, most human beings don't want to do the hard stuff. We don't like doing hard stuff. We need somebody to push us, even in the gym. That's why oftentimes, I know for myself, I did much better if I had a workout partner
Yep.
than if I went by myself, because I had someone to hold me accountable. I had someone to push me. I had someone to put more weight on there than I wanted to do that day, or whatever the case may be, right?
Yep.
But for a lot of people in life, and so what happens is, this is what's really interesting. I'm going to touch on this topic, I think, in my Sunday video, is making the most of your time. And time really is, as much as anything, it's a mental process whereby we make sense of our lives out of our memory of the past, our present moment and where we're headed in the future, right? But here's the thing about time. In order to create a memory that you have easy access to, it has to have significant meaning, enough significance
Hmm.
that your brain says, oh, this was important, or this was pleasant, or this was terrible, and puts it in sort of a filing cabinet. Everything else gets shredded. So, you could think about your memory mechanism back there as I picture it. The way metaphor I picture it is there's a guy back there, like, I don't know, like I picture a scene from Office Space, that old movie from the
Yep.
90s, Office Space. There's a guy back there, and all these TPS reports or whatever are coming out, and he's got to decide where to put them. And 90% of it is shred.
Yep.
90% of it is just garbage, right? So what I mean by that is, what did I have to eat 3 weeks ago on a Friday night? Heck, I don't know. What did I wear, when I was, what is today? The 19th?
Hmm.
What did I wear May 19th, 2011? What clothes did I wear? I have no idea. So all that stuff that's routine for us just gets shredded, shred, until something significant comes along. So I go on a vacation that's really unique and different, and I enjoy myself. That's going to get filed under the file vacations. Somebody throws a surprise party for me for my birthday or something, and a bunch of people show up that I haven't seen in a long time, go to a family reunion, significant moments, right?
Yep.
Have a death, someone close, or go through some painful sort of event that gets filed over here. The problem is when you're stuck in a rut, your brain adapts to it so that it becomes normal. And this is why people think they're where did the time go?
Yep.
And this is why, especially with kids, because when you have your kids, life changes, man. It becomes all about, those kids to a large degree, and it's very monotonous. It's changing diapers. It's, especially those first few years, it's feeding times, diaper. I mean, it's very consistent and very mundane. And so then people look back on those early years with their kids and they say, all of a sudden now they're teenagers or whatever, or they're grown up, say, where did the time go? Well, part of the reason that we're saying, where did the time go, is because we weren't creating those significant moments, if you get what I mean.
Yep.
So I'm saying all this to buy into what you're saying about, getting stuck in that rut.
Yeah.
And the point I'm trying to make is it's up to us. Like you got to fight to not just get sucked into what the system wants you to be and do.
Yep.
And part of that then is challenging yourself. Part of that then is making decisions. Part of that is pivoting. Part of that is learning from your mistakes. You could have probably easily stayed with low credit. Lots of people do. Lots of people do that for years. It takes significant change to dig yourself out of something like that. If somebody's just generally an asshole and they turn people off, and then they look around and they're like, I don't have anybody in my life, it's going to take some introspection, some self-reflection, but all of that is growth, right? And so in this whole concept of transition, there's so many components to it, but one of the components is that we need to challenge ourselves, and that keeps us growing. That's why a lot of people, they don't grow after 25. They think the same way they thought when they were 25, when they're 55 or 65.
Yep.
They do the same things. They go to the same places. They take the same vacations. I knew some people that they just went to Disneyland or Disney World
Yep.
every time they went on vacation. And I would think after the 15th or 16th time to Disneyland, as wonderful as it is, how do you separate which Disneyland trip was which? It just kind of blends together in this sort of gestalt memory thing that you have. So even though transitions are uncomfortable, what I'm trying to say is, even though transitions are uncomfortable, and even though it's easy to stay stuck in that rut and spinning your wheels, if you spend your life that way, the years are going to pass, and you're going to look back and say, where did the years go?
Yep.
Because you didn't create enough growth and enough significance and enough change within yourself and challenges to have an enriched memory. I'm getting into my Sunday morning stuff that I'm going to do.
and it's funny, like you talk about time, and and you know, you're talking about that you're going to speak on that on Sunday, because I was thinking about on Sunday talking about time management. It's funny, it's
That'd be perfect.
it's serendipitous, but um, one of the things that you said something really profound, and I want to really harp on this for a minute, because I think that we spend too much of our lives going through the motions
Hmm.
instead of actively making a memory.
Hmm.
And I'm going to tell a story, if I can tell a story, because in the city of Detroit, the streets have alleys in between each block. And it used to be back in the day that that was where you put your garbage, right? And the garbage trucks went down the alley and they picked up the trash. Well, now they pick it up on the street, and alleys are they basically, like, alleys were easements that the city had on your property. Now people are like reclaiming the easements, and you'll find that alleyways don't really go to anywhere, because they'll stop at somebody's yard that's extended all the way out into the middle of the alley. Well, anyway, when we were, I want to say I was like maybe 12, and my friend Inman was 14. And Inman was a brilliant guy. He was ultimately the chief engineer for the Pontiac Fiero, if you remember that car.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do.
Well, Emma was brilliant, and one day, you know, like on a summer vacation, or right before summer vacation, he was like, he rolls out this blueprint that he made, and he says, "We're gonna dig a tunnel from your backyard to my backyard." Now, you think that that's, you know, pretty, you know, you dig a hole, right? And you dig the hole, and basically it went from behind our garage, kind of like at about a 40-degree angle, to his backyard on the next block, and coming up in the behind the barbecue pit that his dad built, a brick barbecue pit. So that was the path. This tunnel went down about 16 feet underground, and the tunnel was about 3 feet wide, and about not quite 3 feet tall, and it was kind of like a half dome shape, right? It was flat on the bottom, but the top was, you know, concave, because Inman said that that would provide better weight distribution, and the tunnel wouldn't cave in. So anyway, long story short, we built this fucking tunnel.
Oh my
And
goodness.
it took us almost 2 months to build, but we were out there. We're moving dirt like day and night. Like after we were supposed to be in bed, like me and my brother Brian, we tie bed sheets to a vent pipe in our house, and we'd climb down like Batman out the back window and go out, and we're digging. And so finally we have this thing going. And Inman found like that we lived right near a Borton's ice cream factory. So they would have all kinds of dry ice, you know, just out there. So Inman figured that, okay, if we put some dry ice down there and have a fan at each end of the tunnel, that we'd ventilate this thing, and it would be nice and cool, and it'd be a great place to hang out. And so we had this thing going on until my stepfather found it. But when he found it, he called people that he worked with and said, "You guys got to come and see this. See what my kids did." You know?
Yeah.
And so to this day, this is a memory. Everybody that was involved in the building of this tunnel, we can all go back to that and say, you know, remember when we did this? We dug this fucking hole that was 16 feet down, 30 feet across, you know, and that's what we did. We This is something we accomplished. It was an engineering feat, right? What am I
Hmm.
getting at? Is that sometimes you have to do some things that are really outside of your comfort zone, that are
Mhm.
outside of what you think your area of expertise is, outside of what you think you is possible for you. And you do this, and then you have this memory. Now,
Mhm.
why is the memory important? Because the memory triggers the transition. See,
Right.
if you want to have positive transitions or transitions into a positive outcome, then you have to say, what can I do positively that will yield some positive outcome?
Mhm.
And I think that one of the problems is that because we live, man, this week has been something else for me. Actually, the last 2 weeks, because last week I was so stressed out at work that I had to take the day off Friday because it was like my blood pressure was sky high and all of that. And so I said to myself, I said, I'm not going to let this kill me. This job is not going to kill me. I like what I do, but it's not going to kill me. So I went into this week. Now, this week was stressful, but at the same time, there was a lot of fuck it in my thinking, right? Because I could allow a negative situation to culminate and produce a negative transition. And I said, that's not going to happen. So every day this week, even though it was not a good week, I woke up every day saying, this is going to be a great day. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be a great day. I'm saying that. Now, it wasn't a great day every day, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been because I had fixed my mind to not create or not trigger a negative transition. So again, so when you said transition, man, that completely and totally resonated with me because I'm like,
Mhm.
uh, I think about my life. It's these transitions. It's the pivots. It's how did I go from this to this? And so let me say this before I kick it back to you. Right
Yeah,
there
no,
was
you're
a
doing good.
show from the '60s, Rod Serling, The Twilight Zone.
Oh,
Right.
yeah. Mhm.
And the whole point of the Twilight Zone is, what is twilight? Twilight is that transition between light and darkness, between
Right.
day and night. And so the
Mhm.
whole purpose or the whole point of the Twilight Zone is that there were these vignettes about the transition between something light and something dark, or something dark and something light. And the show happened in that transition. And so that's the other thing too, is that transitions can be a little scary, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Rod Serling played on that deftly because the transitions are scary. And it was all about, transitions between life and death, between Earth and some other planet, between good and evil. The entire series was totally predicated on transition. So
Yeah.
it's like you said something here that really resonated with me.
I'm gonna
Make the
I'm gonna read
memory.
yeah, I'm gonna read you something, probably my favorite quote of all time. I've revisited this over and over and over. Um, but it's from, William H. Murray, and it says, "Until one is committed, there is hesitancy, the chance to draw back. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too.
Mm,
All sorts of things occur to help one that never otherwise would have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising in one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings and material assistance, which no man could have dreamed would have come his way. Whatever you can do or dream you can do, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it.
wow,
Begin it now."
man, you somehow or the other, if you can cut and paste that and put it in the chat, I think
Yeah.
that's something that will help a lot of people.
It, yeah. Go ahead.
No, no, that I was just saying that's something that's powerful.
Let's see here. I'm not sure how to do that because I'm still learning this stuff. So I'm gonna put it in a chat to you and let you deal with that.
Okay,
How's that
no
sound?
problem. I got you covered, man. Here it comes.
But I've lived with that since I was at least 30 years old, and I can honestly say that quote has given me strength to make decisions, and it's helped me through transitions because and I think here's the key: until one is committed, until one definitely commits oneself, that's the key.
Yep.
Until one definitely, but from that decision then issues all sorts of supports and material assistance and all these things that can come your way. And I've lived that over and over again. But I've also found, and I'm going to get biblical here, I've also found in most cases for me, between the wilderness and the promised land, I'm sorry, between Egypt and the promised land, there's a
It's a
wilderness.
wilderness. Yep.
In between, with Joseph, in between the dream of ruling over his brothers, there's a pit and a prison.
Yep.
and that's why I think that the point is definitely commit one's self, because there are also going to be, with the provisions and with the support and with the providence and with the material assistance, there's also going to be challenges that you did not foresee when you embarked on the journey, right?
Yep.
And I love it because W.H. Murray was a mountain climber, right? And I think he led some Everest expeditions and stuff like that. And so life can kind of be like that. And when you're leveling up, when you're moving up, it's like climbing that mountain.
Yep.
There's going to be help, but there's also going to be pushback. There's going to be resistance along the way. And so that part about being committed, and I've just found that to be true, Derrick. I was telling you about something in my own personal life that I don't want to get into, but once I made a decision, then things just started falling in place to create a pathway
Yep.
for me to go forward in some things. But until then, it was always hesitancy and the chance to draw back. And so the issue is you're not in transition until there's no more chance to draw back. That's the difference.
That's powerful.
That's the pivot. When there's a chance still to draw back, we haven't even gotten to transition yet, much less to where you're going.
Now, if I can get biblical with you,
Sure.
right? That people who are lukewarm are people that are stuck in the transition.
For sure.
You're not hot, you're not cold.
Yeah.
You're like, meh, lukewarm, indifferent, undecided, right? So that word committed is so crucial to this, because how do you get out of a transition? You have to commit to taking the step in the direction of the next scene, right? Or you have to commit to backing up, right?
Yep.
When you're driving your car, the car goes nowhere if you're in park.
Right.
You start the engine, but as long as you're in park, the car goes nowhere. You have to commit to a direction. You have to put the car in drive to go forward, or put the car in reverse to back up. But you have to commit to one of those gears in order to make the car move. And I think that part of the problem is, a lot of times relationship experts talk about commitment phobia.
Yeah.
Commitment phobia. I don't want, I'm scared to commit to a relationship. But if you look at it, it's like people are afraid of committing to a relationship. But if you look at their lives, you'll see that they're afraid to commit to even basic decisions.
Yeah.
Am I going to save money or spend money? Am I going to buy a house or not buy a house? Am I going to take a new job or not take a new job, or move or not move? That if you find someone that has commitment phobia, chances are they have commitment issues across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenge. So again, to the people that are watching, the call to action is to not get stuck in park or neutral in your life. If you're going to go forward, make the conscientious decision to go forward and do it.
Yeah.
If you need to retreat, make the conscientious decision to retreat.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with retreating.
No, because this is an interesting thing. Like in boxing and in martial arts, there is a technique, if you will, to a what you call a calculated retreat. In other words, you're going to back up, a couple of steps away from the action to either give yourself a chance to recover from a blow that you've taken, or to draw your opponent in to make them think that you are hurt. In either case, it works to your advantage, because in the former, it gives you time to clear your head.
Mm-hmm.
But in the latter, it makes your opponent think that you're wounded. And so what you want to do is you want to trigger something in them to go in for the kill. And now you create a transition whereby you're able to ascertain victory, or at least to score a tactical advantage, right? And that's the thing, man. It's managing these transitions. And I want to pivot. I want to pivot here in the discussion, right? That we've talked about mental agility,
Mm-hmm.
emotional agility, uh, intellectual agility. I mean, basically, you have to be flexible. Think about this, right? That when people first started writing shit, what did they write
Mm-hmm.
on? Stone tablets or cave walls, right?
Mm-hmm.
The problem with stone tablets and cave walls is that they're not particularly portable. You're writing the
Right.
vision down, but you can't run with it, right? So, to use something else biblical, because Aaron, you said something a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to pick on this for just a second, just a quick second, that you and I studied theology, studied biblical things for many, many years, and then we kind of got to the point where we said, I don't want to talk about that anymore. But you know what though? We have time invested in this, so that shit owes us.
Yes, it does.
So when you say I'm going to use something biblical, it's like before I used to kind of wince, but now I'm like, hell
Yeah.
yeah. But that's the thing. So stone tablets, cave walls, you can't run with that. But when you started putting it on sheepskin and
Mm.
rolling it into scrolls or putting it on papyrus, now you create a portable document, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now, and for the record, all of you that are watching, PDF, because you guys get PDFs all the time, that you're signing documents, for credit cards or for a home loan or a car loan or whatever, right? PDF stands for portable document format.
Mm.
That's what PDF stands for. So,
Interesting. I
so,
didn't know
so
that.
now it's something that's beyond paper. It's beyond anything
Right.
else. You could put gigabytes of documents or of data into a PDF, right? And it's just however many bits that it takes to move it from one place to another. But that's how portable we've gotten with our documentation. We've gone from stone tablets and cave walls to sheepskin to papyrus to paper, to screens to PDFs, right?
Mm.
So the
Mm-hmm.
thing is, what we're doing is in each one of these things, we're transitioning from one form of data to another. And in each one of these things, in order for the transition to happen, adoption has to happen. In other words, the people who use this, they have to adopt this as a standard. And once they adopt it as a standard, now a transition has been created. We transition from on screen to PDF, right? and
Hmm.
whatever the next thing is, right? We
Hmm.
whatever that is, the thing is we all of these things trigger a transition from one thing to the next. And one of the things that I'm going to say this and I'll stop talking. I guess
No,
yeah.
it's good, man.
There are so many companies like there. How many of you in the audience remember Wang Computers? Wang Computers. Not many of you, but here's the thing: Wang invented what's called virtual memory. In other words, not just the RAM that's in the motherboard, but using the disk as virtual memory, right? And so they came up with a system was called the VS, the which was virtual system, right? And it was the first system to exploit virtual memory like this. It was something that became adopted by Microsoft, by Apple, by virtually every computer manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Wang was very good at innovating and very bad at transitioning. And what happened was eventually Wang they created a closed ecosystem. They didn't allow other people to code to outside of their partners to code to their standard. And so what happened was that Microsoft they made basically their Windows API application program interface available to everyone, right? Joe Mashuda says, "I remember the jokes." Yeah, because Wang, the computer named after a dick. That was literally in the Groove Tube movie, right? But it was like Wang didn't expose these things. God, that sounded bad. Wang didn't expose. Anyway, they didn't make their coding systems available to everyone, and so as a result, Microsoft came in and basically ate their lunch and popped the bag. Right? That's what happened. But now everything is open source, right? Everything, every major computing platform is some form of open source. So now everybody can code against some things, and what they're doing is the companies that are the most successful or the most or not even the most successful in their coding, but the ones that provide the best support are the ones that survive. In other words, they went through the transition and survived. And many of them actually triggered the transition because like Linus Torvald, he came up with the Linux operating system, and when Torvald came out with that, everybody thought, another flavor of Unix, who cares, right? But now everything from Android to Apple to everything runs some flavor of Linux. It's ubiquitous, and the companies that have embraced this change, this transition, they were intellectually flexible, they were economically flexible, they embraced that transition, and now they profit from it. That's what I was trying to get to.
Hmm. Yeah. So just listening to you talk there. So really what we're talking about is the rate of change and our flexibility within it. So transition's all about change, and life changes. Whether we want it to or not, life changes. What would be an interesting topic. I don't know if this might be for after hours, but I've been thinking about this concept because I communicate, in my job with teenagers mostly,
Yep.
late teenagers, early 20s, thinking about my kids. And I tell all of them, like, you're native to this world. I'm an immigrant because I didn't keep up with all the change that was happening. So I was talking to somebody last week and I don't remember what it was that they were doing, but they loved that they could use an app for it. And I'm like, if I have to download one more fucking app, I'm gonna blow my brains out. Like, I remember when you could talk to a human being to do that, right?
Yeah.
And I want human interaction. I don't care if it's more efficient. I want to go to Starbucks and order my coffee. I don't want to get it on an app and pick it
Yeah.
up, over here with my name on it or something like that. Um, so I think that's why, I remember when I was younger, the older people would say, "Oh, the world's going to hell in a handbasket," and now that I'm in that older person category, I'm thinking the world's going to hell in a handbasket. And I don't think that it's going to hell. I think that it's culture shock. So it'd be interesting to talk about uh, generational culture shock, or not keeping up with the times, not keeping up with the changes. In other words, the world was moving on, especially in technology. You may not have experienced this as much, Derrick, because your career was tied to, technology. But for me, when it wasn't, I just like the world was going one direction, and I'm not on the train, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden it gets to a point where you're at the destination, whether you wanted to be or not. Like Scotty beamed you over to that world, and now you really are experiencing symptoms of culture shock, because it's a totally different culture, it's a totally different world, it's a totally different way of doing things. And so the generation gap now is greater, I think, probably greater than it's ever been. Before the technological revolution, if you were, I go back to that movie. What was that movie? Coco or something, where they were celebrating the Day of the Dead.
Yep.
And the guy was a shoemaker, and he came from a family of shoemakers, but he wanted to be a musician.
Yep.
The cycle of life, it was the same because the world didn't change. But now, the kids that are getting out of college today, they're facing a completely different world, totally different world than the world I faced when I was coming out of college. And my kids that are growing up in middle school, they're facing a completely different middle school
Mm-hmm.
than having a totally different middle school experience. I think it still sucks, probably. But you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I'm putting all these things together as you're talking, and I'm thinking, really what we're talking about is change, and how we pace change
Yeah.
for ourselves in our lives, or how we avoid change because of fear or lack of commitment or overthinking or comfort or avoidance to commitment, or whatever those things might be.
But the thing is that I can't. This is a seminal talk. Seminal. I
Mm,
mean, it's like it speaks to roots and origins, um, because how you manage the transitions of life speaks to how you react to change,
yeah.
right? And this ultimately, and I'm going to say something here that's going to piss some people off, but this speaks to who you are fundamentally, because
Yeah.
this is the thing. Let me give you an example. My uh, my wife's stepmom has an iPhone, right? And she is totally down with it. She manages her Facebook, her texts, her emails. She does it wonderfully.
Hmm.
My stepmom has an iPhone and she manages it wonderfully. My mom, and mom, if you're watching, because I know you do sometimes, I've said this before, so I'm not busting on you, but I said this to you. You're the only person I know that can fuck up an iPhone. I've told Shirley that she's the only one, the only person I know that can fuck up an iPhone. Now, here's the thing. Like Angie's mom has an Android smartphone, but she doesn't really fully utilize it. And my dad still has his Motorola StarTAC. And he won't give out his number because he's afraid of you using up his minutes, even though my stepmom's got, like, they're on an unlimited plan, but he still thinks so. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that there are some people that manage this transition. It's like,
Yeah.
so here's the thing, right? That change happens. Some change you drive, and
Hmm.
sometimes change drives you.
Yep.
But in either case, it is your adaptability, it is your elasticity, it is your agility, it is your flexibility that determines how you go from one scene to another, or if you remain stuck in the twilight zone
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
between here and there, right? And again, I think that this is so powerful because if you get this, if you understand, okay, change happens, but how does this impact me? I think, and some people say, well, that's a selfish question. I don't think it is. I think how it affects me is a valid question because
Sure.
watch this. Somebody's watching you.
Hmm.
You're going to be someone's either either you're going to be you're going to be someone's proverb or you're going to be someone's parable.
I love that.
People are watching you, and how you
Yeah.
manage these transitions is going to help shape how others manage these transitions when they're
Mhm.
faced with the same thing.
Mm-mm-mm.
So what you want to do is you want to be a positive example and not a negative one. In other words, you want to be someone's proverb and not someone's parable,
Mm.
right? Um, when you understand that life happens, change
Mm-hmm.
happens,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm going to there are going to be repeated scene changes. And watch this. Let me say this too, because I think that we do it a disservice just by saying that we're changing from one moment to another. But it's something when the scene changes. Sometimes the scenery changes, sometimes the environment changes, sometimes the wardrobe changes. Sometimes time changes. I mean, if you think about like when you're watching a movie, you go from one scene to the next and it's like a totally different time.
Mm-hmm.
And that may literally be your testimony, but you have to be able to navigate that. You have to be able to embrace the transition. And I can't overemphasize this enough. You have to embrace the transition without getting stuck in it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend that we used to tease him because we used to say, "Dude, you're stuck in 1978. You're stuck in 1978." Because the music, the mindset, everything, the clothing, everything was like that point in time. Because at that point in time, that was when he was at his zenith, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, fortunately, things
Mm.
happen. He had got married, had kids. Kids grew up, and he was forced to change. Now, some people in his case would go kicking and screaming. He didn't. He didn't like the transitions, but he navigated them, and he wound up on the other side. And he said, okay, maybe life wasn't so great over here. Maybe it's better over here.
Yeah.
And so he began to embrace the change and he didn't get stuck in the transition anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a powerful thing because again, for everyone that's watching, it's not too late. It's never too late. Never ever
Mm-hmm.
ever too late that you can uh, get out of this transition and move to something else. And so for our friends in deconstruction, which there are many of our friends, many of our mutual acquaintances, many of our friends are are going through different stages of deconstruction. And here's what I want to say about deconstruction is that eventually you have to make a decision as to what you're going to do. Another story, and I'll shut up. When I bought a house in Detroit, and in this house I had a garage, and the garage was leaning a few degrees to one side. So I
Hmm.
had some friends that they were like, "Hey, we'll put a come along on the beams in the garage, and we'll straighten that rascal right up." And so we put the come alongs are straps that you ratchet, right?
Hmm.
And eventually, you get this thing back to a 90-degree true, right? Well, that lasted about a month
I was going to
before it
say,
started leaning again, and now it's putting stress
yeah,
on the come alongs, right? And
yeah.
so finally, I reached out to somebody who was a garage expert.
Hmm.
And dude came out and he looked at it. He said, I see you got these come alongs here. He said, but you know what? Like I know, that this is not sustainable. Eventually, the come alongs are going to give up and the garage is going to lean further. He said, basically, you need to tear this down and rebuild it. So I paid the money, had someone come out and demolish my garage and haul away all the shit. But I was like going to use the same foundation to build a new garage.
Wow.
And so my same friend who told me that I needed to tear it down, he said, dude, he said, I hate to break this to you. He said, but your foundation is fucked. You can't build anything on this because you'll spend 15, $16,000 to build a garage, and it'll wind up the same, just like the old one. He said, your foundation is fucked. You got to tear it all up. What am I getting at? Is that you can't build on something that is not sound, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is that um, when I deconstructed my garage, I wound up having to go from deconstruction to total destruction. Because if I had just simply deconstructed and rebuilt on what I deconstructed, I would have been back in the same mess that I was in the first place, and I would have been a lot of money lighter, right? So what I had to do is I had to go to full destruction, tear it down to the foundation, totally uproot the foundation, and redo the whole thing. Now, I never got around to doing that before I sold the house. That's somebody else's problem. But the point that I'm getting at is that, like with deconstruction, a lot of us are putting come-alongs on our beams, and we're trying to straighten this thing out into a way that looks pleasing to us, that looks like it's in good shape, but it really isn't because we haven't dealt with the foundational issues underneath. And so transitioning, at some point you have to decide, okay, am I all in for what I deconstructed from? And I've gone down this path, and I see that this is not where I want to go, so I need to go back. Or I've deconstructed, and I really need to come to the conclusion that this is all bullshit and move on. But you can't have it both ways. You can't, and this is what I call the deconstruction industry does. They're keeping people in this twilight zone of deconstruction between this realm of uncertainty. And so, like, to the point that you made in the quote that you shared, commitment. If you're uncertain, you cannot live in uncertainty. And watch this. I know, like, we talk about this a lot with spirituality, like that there is no such thing as true certainty, but
Right.
you have to have some degree of confidence in what it is that you're doing. And
Right.
if you don't develop that confidence, you don't have to be 100% certain, but you do have to be fairly confident of what it is. And if you
Yeah.
haven't developed that confidence, then that means you're living in limbo, and that it's man, it's better to live. It's better to live in ignorant denial
Hmm.
than it is to be in the twilight zone of ignorance and information.
Yeah. I think it's Bernardo Kastrup talks about convenient fictions.
Mm, yeah.
He talked about Newtonian physics as being a convenient fiction that allowed us, to put a man on the moon.
Yep.
And then as, people understood more about the nature of reality, what's actually out there, Newtonian physics isn't it anymore, but it was a convenient fiction that helped us progress. So you have to have certainty in your convenient fictions and be okay with the fact that they're convenient fictions. I love that so much because it allows me to have certainty and make progress while also being open to new information that might improve my map or model or understanding of what's out there, right? And so, not just in physics, but in life, we have to have a convenient fiction that we believe in that keeps us moving forward and gives our lives meaning. And I think we're coming up on just over an hour here, but I think your analogy with the garage is maybe a great place to end it because that's the messy middle right there.
Yep.
With the come alongs, when you got the come alongs up there, you're in the messy middle.
Yep.
Like you realized this sustainable anymore.
Yep.
Something's got to be done. Let's try this. And thus began the messy middle, right?
Yep.
And
Now, I
so
want
that's
to
what
say
life
this.
is like.
There's a young man. He's a preacher that came from the Caribbean up to the U.S. And he used to follow me a lot when I used to teach love, 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 love.
Uh-huh.
And
I know
when
you're.
I began to get into inclusionism and universalism, he told me, he said, Derrick, he said, I can't follow you anymore. He said, because that's a bridge too far for me. And while I didn't agree with him, I really deeply respected his intellectual honesty
Mm-hmm.
because he was like, okay, that's something I can't couch. You know,
Right.
that's deconstructing it a bit too far for me. And so for his response was to return back to a more or a less nuanced stance about his faith,
Yeah.
right? And I got it. I didn't agree with it, but I got it,
Yep.
right? And that's the thing. What I'm saying to everybody, I can't say this enough, that make a decision. What Aaron shared, be committed. Either be committed to where you are and say, this is my scene. I'm going to um, act in this scene as long as I can, or commit to the transition to go to the next scene. But when you make the commitment, don't commit to the transition. Commit to what is the result
Yeah.
of the
So
transition.
exactly like with your garage, with your garage, and I understand you said that you left before you saw the completion. You sold your house and moved before it was completed. But that's what we can do, right? We can just tear down the garage and leave a rotten foundation there and never finish the project because it's too expensive or because it's too much trouble or we don't have the time or whatever. And life can be like that too. You can get stuck going back to bring this full circle. You can get stuck in a transition because you're not committed to the end project, the end goal. The end goal was a garage that didn't lean, right? That wasn't sinking or whatever. And so, yeah, all that other stuff is just the in between. It's
Yep.
just the messy middle. Keep your eyes, again, to quote scripture, I don't know if this is scripture or not now. I'm getting so old, Derrick, and bad. Been so long since I've really read the Bible. I don't know. Maybe I'm misquoting the Bible. But yeah, all those people I used to make fun of, but keep your eye on the prize, keep your eye on the prize, keep your eye on what's out there and just keep going and keep moving
Yep.
and keep adapting, keep adjusting, and you'll eventually get there.
That's it. That's the perfect place to shut her down, man.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
we got some comments out there, but nothing really.
yeah, it was Yeah, we didn't have Ben on tonight to make us think.
Yeah.
There's-
We, you know,
I
I
have to
was
get a
thinking,
dictionary out to understand Ben sometimes. I
what's that?
have to get a dictionary out sometimes to understand Ben.
Oh, I know Ben goes deep,
He's
man.
a wordsmith, man. He is
And
a wordsmith.
I was thinking about him tonight because I went out and bought some craft beer, you
Hmm.
know, just for him, right? And so I got this one beer, and I'll send you a picture of the label, but it's called Brother Thelonious.
Oh,
And it's a beer that was named after Thelonious Monk, the jazz musician.
oh, wow.
And so it has his likeness on the beer, and it's actually very good. And then I got a Samuel Smith's oatmeal stout,
Wow.
and then I got another beer that's called Angry Bastard. and I
I've
was
seen
like,
that. I've
and I
seen
was like, I said, man, I really resonate with that.
I've seen that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to up my beer game. We'll have to have a beer night one of these nights.
Yep.
All right,
So
brother.
anyway,
I think this was awesome. Help me. It really helped me think through. You know, it's one of the things that we do when we're talking like this. It really helps me think through and solidify my thoughts on some things, and in a very helpful way. And so I see Tracy commented that it's been really helpful for her. And I do want to say one thing. This just came back to me, and the fact it came back to me, somebody needs to hear this. The Lord
the
brought it,
Lord is speaking.
but I really felt somebody did need to hear this. When you were talking, and we're talking about change, there is a messy middle in the statement I'm about to make when people say you can't run from your problems. Now, to a certain degree, that's true. I mean, if you're an asshole, wherever you go, you're going to be an asshole. You're going to get the same. You're going to get the same results, right?
Yep.
So, what we're really saying is you need to work on yourself, but not every environment is the best place to work on yourself, and sometimes you do need to move. Sometimes you do need to run away from your problems, because I've talked to some people recently that they're contemplating moving, and their experiences where they've been have been so terrible,
Mhm.
but they're holding themselves back from seriously thinking about moving because they're like, well, I can't run from my problems. And I'm like, yeah, but palm trees don't grow in Colorado either.
Yep.
you know Sharks don't live in the Pueblo Reservoir out here, and
Yep.
although I understand there are some sharks that can live in fresh water, but you get the point. The environment's important,
Yep.
and you can't flourish as well in certain environments. And so I just felt like I needed to say that. Like, maybe there's somebody out there, or some people out there, that you're contemplating making a change, maybe contemplating making a move, and you're keeping yourself stuck because somebody told you, and it sounds like wisdom because we say it all the time. You can't run from your problems. And I just want to nuance that for you a little bit and say, bullshit. If you're a palm tree, get your ass to Arizona.
Yep.
Don't go to Minnesota. Don't come to
That's right.
Colorado. Go to Florida. Go to California. Something like that. So anyway, I felt I needed to share that, and that's my last. That's my. What do they call it when you go watch a stage performance, a music group, and then you're clapping, and they come back out?
Encore.
Yeah, that's my encore. God, I couldn't remember the word. That's my
Or
encore.
in preaching circles, we would say that's your close.
Yeah, that's my third
Or,
close.
or actually, that would be your Baptist close because you're closing after closing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, thanks everybody for coming to our TED Talk. Thanks for listening to us. Thanks for watching, being faithful, and
Love
supporting
you
us.
guys.
Love you guys.
All right.
And peace and hair grease, man. We're out.